is not understood it that well, and so always having help with explaining it to your clients is this should be helpful for that. I want to introduce Dan Mulligan, who's our professional lines underwriter. Many of you will know him already, and so he'll be available during the presentation and afterwards to answer any questions. Our speaker today, our instructor, is Meredith Bennett. She's the National Tech and Cyber Product Leader for United States Liability Insurance Company. She's a super knowledgeable person on this subject. I'm really happy to have her take the time to do this webinar for you. So I have a couple of logistics on the next page, on the next slide. Is someone going to move the PowerPoint forward for me?
I don't have control. Oh.
Is that you, Meredith?
I don't think it was.
Okay. I'll let that. We got a little logistical issue taking place, so I'll let Meredith and Kaylee work that out. I'm going to go ahead and just say our objective today is for retail brokers to learn how best to communicate the importance of cyber liability to your clients. It's as simple as it is. Logistics-wise, you're going to be defaulted, participants will be defaulted to mute, so you'll be able to hear but not speak. So we want you to be able to pose questions in the chat room at any time throughout the webinar. If it's appropriate in the moment, Meredith will answer the question for you. If not, we may hold it till the end and then answer your questions, many of your questions at the very end. So feel free, don't wait till the end to type in your questions as you come across them. You can type them in early and we'll ensure that they get answered. I'm going to turn everything over to Meredith now so that she can present the PowerPoint.
Great. Thank you so much, Shanae. I really appreciate it. That was a great introduction. And I'm excited to be hosting this for you. I am trying to, there we go, get to our agenda. So today we're going to be going over, what is cyber. I think that sometimes it comes down to just understanding exactly what we're talking about, how these breaches occur, the anatomy of a claim. So we'll walk through a claim example. We can, draw some parallels to Equifax if that helps, since everyone's probably pretty familiar with that since it's so recent. And how to successfully sell to the client. Some things that I've seen work really successfully that Anae and Dan have been successful with. And while we're talking about selling, we'll also talk about why some of these businesses need cyber liability. So, Kaylee, I still don't have control, so if you could go ahead and switch. There we go. So what is cyber? Well, just because it happens on a computer doesn't mean that it's covered on a cyber policy. And in fact, loss of paper records will be covered. So a lot of people don't realize that. It's really an information policy. It was designed originally to protect information or personally identifiable information of people for businesses that are responsible to keep that information safe. So when people say, does this have cyber, there's a lot of different elements that could be in a cyber policy. But just because it happens on a computer doesn't mean it's covered, and it doesn't have to be on a computer to be covered on a cyber policy. Kaylee, can you go ahead and switch? So some of the things that we're going to be talking about is personally identifiable information. You'll hear me say this often throughout the presentation. I refer to it as PII. There's a lot of acronyms in the tech and cyber world. PII is probably the most common one that you're going to encounter. And this is private consumer information, all right? Now, a lot of states have laws now that really start to build this definition out. In general, it's anything that can relate back to you. So your first initial and your last name, or your first name and last name, in combination with any unique identifier to you. Driver's license number, credit card number. Some states are using user ID and password, or your email address and your security questions. California recently added in 2016 information or data collected through the use or operation of automated license plate recognition systems. So anything that can be targeted back to you is going to be PII. And then personal health information is a subset of this, and this is your medical information. Okay. A data breach is this theft or disclosure of personally identifiable information or personal health information. So when that information gets out into the public, as we saw with Equifax, or as we saw, everyone's familiar with Target, lots of credit card numbers were breached. Network security and privacy liability, this is a term that we're seeing a lot in contracts. So usually if someone says, well, I need cyber for a contract, they're really looking for network security and privacy liability, which basically says, if I come on your premises and do a job for you, and I cause you to have a breach, I have insurance that covers me for that. It's very common in tech, like technology professionals. We see this wording in their contracts a lot. I've started to see this requirement for accountants if they are going on premises to do clients' work. So it's definitely common in contracts. Whoops. All right, I have control and I went the wrong way. So there's lots of laws. Most are at the federal level that kind of protect us from different aspects. So we have HIPAA, okay? That's one type of privacy or data breach law. And we're probably all familiar with HIPAA because we have to sign that sheet when we go to the doctor that says, yes, we understand that you're going to keep our information private. We could do an entire webinar just on HIPAA compliance and the HITECH Act, so we won't spend a lot of time there. I just like to mention it. Other things, Graham-Leach-Bliley. We get the notice in the mail that this is what our credit card company is going to do with our credit card. This is another law that helps to protect us. But there's really only, at the state level, laws about what businesses need to do if consumer information, or PII, is breached. There isn't a federal law yet. Now, I think that that's going to change pretty rapidly because of Equifax. Equifax was unique because not only were a lot of us, probably all of us, affected, but if you think about the other big breaches that have been out there, like Target, Yahoo, that was our direct information, right? We shop at Target. Target had a breach. We can choose not to shop at Target. What was really interesting about Equifax, which is why I think it's raised a lot of lawmakers' eyebrows, is that we're not the consumer. We're just a product to Equifax. It's the banks and the car dealers and anybody that pulls our credit report that's the customer. So to Equifax, we were just a product that was breached. We can't choose to not shop at Equifax. And I actually did try. I was looking to refinance my house, right? So went to my mortgage company. They needed to pull my credit, and I said, I don't want you to use Equifax. And they said, sorry, we use them. So we're kind of almost, we don't have any say. What's that?
You're held hostage.
Yeah, we are. We're held hostage. We have no say. You know, at Target, we could choose not to shop there, but with Equifax, we couldn't. So anyway, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens at a federal level. But with the states, every single state has their own law. And California, I think that we have quite a few people on the line from California. You were really the ones that set the bar. California was the first breach notification law of its kind, and that was effective July 1st of 2003. And since then, all the other states have kind of followed and said, yeah, you know, a lot of states said, yeah, we're just going to do what California does. It's, you know, they've kind of filed a Me Too law, if you will. And some states have some differences. So, for example, the state attorney general in California wants to be notified if 500 or more California residents have been breached. Arizona and Utah state attorney general have no requirement. Colorado, I think we have some people on the line from Colorado. Your attorney general wants to know if 1,000 or more of your residents have been breached. So just little things like that, and there's all different requirements to the law, but you can see just one little requirement is very different among a handful of states, so you can imagine what it looks like along the landscape of all the laws. New Mexico, if anyone's on the line from New Mexico, you are the latest state to have a breach notification law that went into effect in June. And your definition of personally identifiable information includes biometric data. But what's really important to note is that you have to comply with the law wherever the information that person lives. So for example, if I am an e-commerce site and I am located here in Pennsylvania, which is where I am, I'm located in Pennsylvania, but because I'm e-commerce, I have credit card numbers of every single person in every single state. I don't just comply with Pennsylvania law. I have to comply with every single state law where I have information of someone in that state. I'm going the wrong way here. So basically, all the laws say if you store, collect, or transmit protected consumer data, you have to keep it safe. Transmit being a key word here. Oh, well, you know, I don't hold credit card information. No. I don't store credit card information. No, but you transmit it. You are swiping. So you still are responsible to keep that safe. So I love this pie chart because hackers in red. And when we think about a cyber policy, we think, how do these things happen? How does this information get breached? Hackers, right? 30%, it's right there, nice and big. Look at rogue employee, 11%, and staff mistake, 14%. Add that together, 25%, that's almost as much as hacker. I would argue that lost and stolen mobile device and to a big extent malware and virus is because of human error or lack of human knowledge. So if you add all of that up together, it's more than hacker. A lot of these breaches are caused by employees, whether they be rogue employees or just regular employees that aren't trained to not click on that link. And so probably the biggest, most common is social engineering. Social engineering has been around for a really long time. This is, you know, it's not new, but ways to social engineer someone are new. Phishing being the most common one. You send an email, it looks really convincing, you are able to trick somebody into doing something that they wouldn't normally do, like send W-2s to the wrong email address of all the employees. It happens every January and February with carriers all across the board. So it's not just us that get hit with this claim. Every year we all get hit with this claim because someone's tricked into thinking that it's the president or the CEO of the company that they're sending the W-2s to. Hey, and they send it to the HR manager. I want to take a look at those before you send it out to the employees.
So,
and
Meredith,
then you have a breach.
Quick question for you, Meredith. When
Sure.
you're talking about the social engineering aspect of it and going back to your graph, does the social engineering fall under the rogue and innocent employee aspect or under the hacker section?
I would say that falls under the unsuspecting employee.
Right.
Because there was,
okay.
Yeah, there was no breach into the system. There was no hack into the system, right? I could socially engineer you, and I don't know how to hack it all.
And I think it's important to specifically point that out because the differentiation needs to be really clear. One is hacking in, and the other is making a mistake that actually causes a hacking effect.
Sure.
Okay, sorry to...
No, you're fine. So in a lot of these tricks, social engineering tricks, virus malware. So I said that I think that, a lot of this goes back to human error. Virus malware is kind of that hybrid between is it considered a hack or is it considered employee problem? It's almost both because there's spam emails out there. It's just lots of emails that you get and it looks legitimate and you click on the link and now suddenly your computer is infected with malware. Had the employee known what to look for in that type of phishing scam, they would not have opened the email or they would not have clicked on the link. So that's how most of these viruses and malwares can get in to these everyday small businesses, especially ransomware. I love this picture because I don't think any hacker out there actually wears gloves, but it kind of really, when I think of a hacker, this is what I think of, but it's fun to me. Ransomware is a virus that usually gets in because someone clicks on a link that they, unsuspecting, downloads a virus into their computer and it encrypts all of their files. When they go to access their files, instead of their information being there, there is a ransom note. That's why it's called ransomware. It basically says, give me so much money in cryptocurrency, and we will give you the decryption key so that you can unencrypt your files. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we walk through this claim. So Susie Q, employee, clicks on a link and downloads ransomware. Now what? First thing that we want to do, we want to call the claims team. The claims team is going to work with a breach coach or put the insured in touch with a breach coach. And a breach coach is an expert attorney. Right away, you want that expert attorney involved because any information that comes out of what we find is now privileged information. And they're going to understand all the different laws of all the different states, okay? And they are extremely specialized in data breaches. So probably the first thing that we're going to do is say, all right, let's deal with this ransomware, this cyber extortion, okay? Now, breach coach, covered on a cyber policy. Cyber extortion, covered on a cyber policy. And the insuring agreement for the cyber extortion on your cyber policy will cover the cost for the ransom, right? The cost for a negotiator. So your breach coach is really, really good with all the laws and the legal, but may say, you know what, let's bring in a negotiator. If it's a really large company with a lot of servers, a negotiator works with the hackers to say, all right, we'll pay you a small amount of money to decrypt one of our servers so that we know you're on the up and up before we give you, $10,000 that you're asking for. So negotiators work with these ransomware attackers. And then there's also a reward that you can find on some cyber policies that if the person is caught, there's a reward that is paid. I wish that we would hear about this more, but unfortunately we don't. They are not caught. It's a very lucrative business, ransomware. So after we deal with the cyber extortion, all right, maybe we paid the hackers, maybe we didn't have to because we had all of our data backed up. Regardless, we're probably going to bring in a forensics team now as well, because it could have been a ransomware that, yes, it encrypted our files, but guess what? It also downloaded something else. It downloaded a keylogger, a different type of virus. So we're going to bring in forensics team. And this is typical with any breach. You have to figure out, how did they get in? What did they have access to while they were in there? How do we get them out if they're still in there, right? And a lot of times the notification to the people whose personally identifiable information was taken or affected comes out of what the forensic team finds, okay? Again, this is all covered on a cyber policy. Now we need to notify people, all right? We're going to notify based on the state laws, the federal laws. It's typically in form of a letter. It can be done via a website. You're going to set up a call center because people are going to have questions. Data restoration is something that's also covered on a cyber policy. What if you need to restore the data, all right? So I didn't mention that, but if the data is completely lost and there's a breach, you may have to restore the data. So with the notification and with the forensics, Equifax got a lot of heat for not notifying people in a timely manner. I would say, it was about 5 weeks from the time that they knew about the hack until they notified the public. 5 weeks may not be too off because they had so many servers and so much information. It could have taken forensics a really long time. So that's probably the only area that I would be willing to maybe give Equifax a little bit of slack. But look at the notification. They didn't send us letters. They didn't really do a website. Their website was kind of weird. There was no call center, right? Then credit monitoring. They provided us with credit monitoring with their own company. So the very company that lost our information then was going to monitor our information. Yeah, but and what's interesting is that with credit monitoring, this really gets ahead of the suits because the courts are still kind of out there as far as, can you sue for fear of future damages? So if you haven't had your identity taken and you haven't suffered any damages, can you sue? And in cases where credit monitoring has not been provided, well, that's when the courts say, well, yeah, you do have damages because the person that was affected has to pay for their own credit monitoring. So I have a feeling that as these lawsuits and class actions with Equifax really start to come to light, that if I were a judge, which I'm not, I would say, yeah, you can sue for damages because you should have used a different credit reporting agency to provide credit monitoring to these individuals. That would be my argument if I was going to sue them. Public relations, so again, this is covered on a policy. It's really to get ahead, just to have some good press out there. Home Depot did a great job of this. Equifax, not so much, all right? Reputational harm is something that there's a few carriers out there that will cover it. It's very, very hard to quantify what that is. All right, and so this is different from business interruption in that this happens after all the dust is settled. Okay, reputational harm is what Target suffered when people just stopped shopping there. So it's really hard to quantify that loss, and you'll find reputational harm as a coverage for really large policies. So Equifax probably had reputational harm as a coverage on their cyber policy. Bob's Pizza Shop down the street does not need reputational harm coverage, okay? And I would say that if your breach is that bad, like Equifax, you're going to blow through all of the limits before the reputational harm is even triggered because the breach was so bad. I mentioned business interruption. You know, this is any business that you would lose because of a breach. E-commerce, great example. It's, you know, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and your website is down because you were hacked. Business interruption. It works just like business interruption would on a property policy. There's a waiting period. There's a limit. Okay. One thing to look for as you're looking at your cyber policies is, are all of these coverages that we just mentioned, are they pay on behalf or are they reimbursement? Meaning, you know, let's say I'm a hospital. I may want reimbursement wording because I have a PR team that I already work with. I have in-house counsel. I have a, you know, chief technology officer and some IT vendors that I work with. You know, I get the okay from the insurance company to continue to work with those people, and then I get reimbursed by my insurance company. That's great. That's what they want. Pay on behalf. Bob's Pizza Shop down the street does not have the money to pay these vendors and then wait to be reimbursed by the insurance company. Forensics alone is easily going to cost 20 to 30 grand just to figure out what happened. And then you have all of the other things that need to be paid for. So just something to keep in mind, reimbursement wording versus the pay on behalf of wording for these. And then after all of this, then comes the third-party claims. And so now you have, you know, the state attorney general's coming after you. That would be picked up under your regulatory action. You have your consumer class actions, all of us that sue Equifax. PCI fines and penalties. Again, we could do an entire webinar just on PCI. This is, you know, if you take credit cards, you have to be compliant with the payment card industry's data security standards. If you have a breach and you are found to not be compliant with their standards, they will fine and penalize you. Those are all the third-party exposures that are covered on a cyber policy.
Quick question for you.
Sure.
So let's just say a client contracts services out to a third party, and there is some kind of breach, and they're sued along with that vendor. How would is there coverage on the policy, and because I think that everyone thinks that they're lulled to sleep when they've contracted the services out, and I think that they still have an exposure. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Like, you mean like a payment processor or?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our very, very first cyber breach that we had here at USLI was someone that had their payment processor was PCI compliant and everything was good, and the hacker was able to get into the machine that was located at their restaurant. So it wasn't a breach of the payment processor, it was a breach of the restaurant. But in their mind, they had kind of outsourced all of that, right? Same with, people that have websites that use PayPal. What if someone spoofs your website and people think that they're shopping on your website, or they're able to hack into your website and redirect people to a PayPal website that looks just like PayPal, but it's not actually PayPal. So there are different scenarios where just because you're using PayPal or Stripe doesn't mean that you don't need a cyber policy. And then if the payment processor is breached, then absolutely you could still be brought into that claim.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
And that policy would pick up under the third-party liability section.
You got it. You got it. Thank you. So some things that I've seen work well is educating in math. If you are a member or have access to an association of a large homogeneous group, such as a dental association or a property managers association, it's really great to get in front of all of those people and discuss cyber. I've had customers speak at their Chamber of Commerce meetings. I would say, in general, a lot of these organizations hold monthly meetings, and they're always looking for topics and speakers. And cyber insurance is a really great topic that they love. They love to hear about it. And I guarantee that just by attending this webinar, you already know more than the people in the room because they don't know. They really don't know. Cross-selling the renewal book, I've seen work really well for people. Just saying, hey, here's your property and your GL. Let's talk about cyber, because guess what? Your GL just put an exclusion on to really highlight the fact that the GL policy is not meant for privacy. Or what if there's a $50,000 sublimit that's slapped onto the GL? Do we know what that is? Is it just liability? It probably doesn't cover any of that forensics, breach coach, and if it does, is $50,000 enough? And I bet that it's reimbursement wording and not pay on behalf. So it may be a good time to say, hey, look, I know you have this 50 or 100 grand on your GL, but here's a full policy that has all these really great resources for risk management. You'll have a whole team of people for vendors if you would have a breach, etc. And timing is everything. Like do you cross-sell your book right at renewal when maybe you have a carrier that is increasing rates? That now may not be the time to introduce a new coverage. Maybe you do it 6 months in. The other thing, timing is everything. Capitalize on those big breaches that are happening. Because, yes, we hear about the big breaches in the news, but the small businesses are the ones that we don't hear about, but because they're devastated, right? Equifax targets, they make news because there's so many people that are affected. Right. But 43% of cyber attacks target small businesses. And 60% go out of business within 6 months of a cyber attack. 60%.
Oh, geez. So I want to reiterate that point that you made, Meredith, about that the endorsements that are available for package policies on the GL portion of the and I don't think there's enough coverage, and I think it's super risky for our brokers to assume that that's going to be enough for their clients, or that that's going to protect them just because they've offered a little bit for a very small premium. I think that brokers have to really look at the exposures of all of their clients and propose a standalone cyber policy that actually gives the broad coverage that ultimately they would need the coverage for.
Yes. Thank you. And I just thought of this as we talked about in the beginning of the webinar when I said, you know, does this have cyber? It's just such a general question. And as you saw, there's so many different things that could be covered. So what if, you know, someone says, well, does this have cyber? And you say, yeah, you have a $50,000 limit. And then they have a huge data breach and are hit with PCI fines and penalties that aren't covered on that $50,000, $100,000 sublimit, you know, wouldn't they come back and say, well, you told me I had cyber? Well, you don't have all of the coverages that are available on a standalone cyber policy. So a little bit about USLI's policy, and then Dan will walk through how to get a quote with us or with CID. We specialize.
By the way, Meredith,
yes,
just before
yes.
I just want to encourage everyone, if you have questions, please start typing them in now so that we can make sure that we get everyone's question answered before we sign off at the end. So feel free to start chatting or asking questions now. Go ahead.
Thank you. So USLI specializes in small businesses, and we write a lot of different classes: restaurants, nonprofits, doctors. All of these are classes that really have an exposure, nonprofits especially, with all of their donors, and depending on what they're doing, you know, could have medical records, and then they're subject to HIPAA compliance. Retail shops, like I said, you know, small doctors and dentist offices, property managers, real estate offices, accountants. We have a really short application just to get an indication. So if you decide that you want to do a cross-sell with your renewal book, we have sort of a quick app available to do that, just to get an indication out there, just to start the conversation of, you know, this is about how much it would cost, etc. And every USLI cyber policy holder receives access not only to our Business Resource Center, but to eRisk Hub. eRisk Hub is an online risk management tool. It has a lot of really great resources on it. There's an entire page dedicated to how to avoid phishing attacks. There's an entire page dedicated to how to train your employees. We have a lot of nonprofits that utilize both of those pages because they have a lot of volunteers, and you know, the people that work at these nonprofits are very transient, so they're constantly training people on cybersecurity. eRisk Hub, great tool for that. It's free. Business Resource Center, we could do a whole webinar on that. So I won't get into that right now. The USLI product, our average policy premium that we have on the books is about $1,200. I released the quote the other day that was under $400. It all depends on the limits, the class, etc. We are pay on behalf of wording for all of our coverages, in case you're wondering, and we have a 4 coverage part type of policy, each with a separate limit. So that's another thing to look for as you're shopping out your cyber policies. Do you have a separate limit for your expenses than your liability? Because you don't want to blow through your limit with forensics and notification and credit monitoring and the public relations firm and then not have any money left if the lawsuit comes in, all right? And so that's all I have. Dan, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, if in the event that you need a quote, we have several different ways to get it. The easiest thing is if you can just shoot me an email with the name of the company, their revenues, confirmation that they haven't had any cyber claims, and what they do. I should be able on most classes to get you a quote within 24 hours on that. We also have a phone quote system where you can dial our phone quote system at 877-969-7539 and get a quote over the phone there too. And web quoting is available on it there, but just a simple email with the basic information should be enough to get me so I can get you an indication within a really short period of time.
Great. It looks like we had a question, what are the average limits for a $1,200 policy? $1 million across the board. And, you know, it all depends on, because we rate on revenue and class of business. So it could be that, you know, our book is a little bit higher in revenue or a little bit higher class that will skew the average policy premium as well. But like I said, you know, if you're like an artisan contractor and you're looking for a $250,000 limit, we could get that price down pretty low for you. Next question, can you send us marketing brochures for cyber that help explain coverages to the clients and why they need this coverage versus throw in coverage in their package? Yeah, I believe Dan and Anae can send those out to the people that have joined us today.
Absolutely. And we're also going to, this recording, this PowerPoint and the recording of it will be on our website. So you can go back and listen to it again and hear all the wonderful things that Meredith had to share about cyber. Another question?
Yeah. Is there a way to calculate the cost per record now so that we can find out what the correct limit is? That is the $1 million question. There are lots of different data breach calculators out there that are based on a lot of different aggregated data. I saw a blog right after Equifax came out that the blogger had pooled all the different calculators from all the different websites and calculations from 2015 versus 2017, and it was so many different average cost per record breaches that, you know, one of them said that Equifax would only have needed an $8 million limit, and one of the models said that they would have needed like $13 trillion in limits to be sufficient to cover everything. So it really comes down to the size of the records and all of that. So I would probably try Net Diligence. They have a data breach calculator, and they work with a lot of us and aggregate the data. So that's what I would say to you.
That's a good answer.
Are there more parts available than just the 4 that were shown? No, it's the first party to third party, the website, and the credit. Yeah, the identity theft. There are coverages within those coverages.
Yes.
So I'm not sure what if whoever asked that question, is there something specific that you're looking for? I can let you know if it's in there.
Right, because I think Dan can provide a full breakdown of what that defined in a more detailed manner so that they can see everything. Okay, any other questions? We've gone over a little bit today, but I think the information was super valuable and important for everyone, for all of us to hear. Meredith, I want to thank you so much for participating with us in this, and I think it should be a great help. There's one more question. What are the normal limits of recontacting clients? I'm not sure. Does that make sense to you, Meredith?
No, I'm not sure what they mean.
What are the normal limits of recontacting clients? Well, that's include, is that a sublimit, Meredith, or is that part of the liability limit?
The normal limits of recontacting, meaning like notification?
That's what I'm thinking.
So, oh, we have no limit on the number of people.
Okay, that's what okay.
Okay, yeah.
That should answer that.
We have
question.
no limit. Mm-hmm.
Some have a limit of 10,000 people. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah, we have no limit.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. Any other questions? going, gone.
And if you do have any questions, just email them directly to me at Daniel@CID Insurance, and I will get the answers for you relatively quickly.
Perfect. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. There is a brief survey at the end, if you would be so kind to take the survey and let us know how we did. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you again, Meredith.
Oh, thank you. It was my pleasure.
Bye, everyone.